My husband caught me touching myself. I accidentally told him it's his fault for being so worthless. Hello, Reddit. This is my first time posting, so I really hope I'm doing this right. I've been thinking a lot about how I got here, to this moment I'm about to share. It's not something I'm proud of, and I know it might paint me in a bad light, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest. Maybe it'll help me make sense of it all, or at least give me some clarity. So here goes. My name is Evelyn, and my husband's name is Oliver. I'm 32, and Oliver is 31. We've been married for about 5 years now, and for the most part, things have been great between us. I'm not going to say we're one of those picture-perfect couples you see on Instagram, but we've always had a strong connection. We've worked through our challenges together, and our relationship has always felt solid. Oliver, well, he's the kind of guy people dream of marrying. He's thoughtful, romantic, and honestly goes above and beyond for me. He's the type who remembers the little things, like how I like my coffee, or the way I always leave my book halfway open on the nightstand. He's the kind of guy who surprises me with date nights just when I need them the most, who checks in on me during busy work days, and makes me feel seen and appreciated. In many ways, he's the perfect husband. He's caring, attentive, and always puts me first. There's no doubt he loves me, and I love him too. He's the kind of person who would drop everything to help me, and I know he'd never intentionally hurt me. We've had our fair share of disagreements, like any couple, but nothing major. Every time we've argued, we've always been able to talk it through and move past it. Now don't get me wrong, Oliver has always been amazing. But like I mentioned earlier, we've had our fair share of issues over the years. Every couple does, right? I mean, no relationship is perfect, no matter how it may look from the outside. And one of the biggest challenges we faced early on in our marriage was my past struggle with masturbation. It's something I'm not proud of, and it's a part of myself that I don't like to talk about. But it's a huge factor in this whole situation, so I think it's important to explain. Back when Oliver and I first got married, I was dealing with what I can only describe as a full-blown addiction to masturbating. It was something I'd been struggling with long before we got together. And when I say addiction, I mean it in the truest sense of the word. It wasn't just an occasional thing, I was doing it constantly. And it was starting to affect my life in really negative ways. I'd sneak off during the day, at work, at home, whenever I had a few minutes alone. It became something I was relying on, something I couldn't go without. It wasn't just about the physical act either. It became a mental escape, a coping mechanism for stress, boredom, or whenever I felt overwhelmed by life. Oliver, being the kind and understanding person he is, stood by me through it all. But it wasn't easy for either of us. It caused a lot of tension in our relationship, especially in the beginning. He felt like I was shutting him out emotionally and physically, and in a way I guess I was. It's not that I didn't want to be intimate with him, but my addiction had gotten in the way. It created this barrier between us, and I knew it was hurting me, even though he never said it outright. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he'd go quiet whenever I would talk about it, and honestly, it hurt me too. I hated that I was hurting the person I loved the most, but at the same time I couldn't stop. It took a long time for us to walk through that. I eventually sought help, both through therapy and by being honest with Oliver about what I was going through. We had to have some tough conversations, but we made it through. I also relapsed a lot of times, but together we made it through. Together we came up with some ground rules for our relationship, things that would help us rebuild trust and intimacy. One of the biggest rules we agreed on was no porn and no masturbating on either side. It was a mutual agreement, but it was mostly for me, to help me stay accountable and to prevent me from falling back into old habits. For a while, it worked. I managed to get control over my addiction, and our relationship improved a lot. Oliver was supportive through the whole process, and I genuinely felt like we were in a better place because of it. But despite all that, there has been one area of our relationship that has never quite clicked for me, and that is our sex life. It's not that Oliver doesn't try. He absolutely does. He's attentive and always makes an effort to make sure I'm comfortable and satisfied. But the truth is, I've never really felt fully satisfied with him in the bedroom. It's not something I like to admit, and I've spent years trying to figure out why. Is it him? Is it me? Am I just expecting too much? I don't know. What I do know is that no matter what we try, no matter how hard he works, there's always this sense of incompleteness, like something is missing. And to be completely honest, I think it's more of a me issue than an us issue. I know Oliver is doing everything he can, and he's always willing to listen and try new things if I bring them up. But deep down, I've come to realize that I'm just not satisfied, and I don't know how to fix that. It's frustrating to say the least, and I've started to feel guilty about it, like I'm somehow betraying him by not feeling the way I should. For a long time, I've kept these feelings to myself, mostly because I don't want to hurt Oliver. I mean, how do you, the person who's been nothing but amazing to you, that you're not happy in one of the most intimate parts of your relationship? It feels wrong, like a betrayal of everything we've built together. So I've stayed quiet, hoping that maybe it's something that would just work itself out over time. But as time went on, those feelings of dissatisfaction only grew stronger, and they started to weigh on me. I honestly tried my best not to give in at first. I really did. After all the work I had put into overcoming my addiction, the therapy, the conversations with Oliver, and the constant effort to maintain those ground rules we'd set, it felt like I owed it to both of us to keep fighting against those urges. I told myself over and over again that I could push through it, that if I just ignored the growing frustration, it would eventually go away. But the truth is, it didn't. The more I tried to suppress the dissatisfaction I felt in the bedroom, the worse it became. It was like a slow burn that started as a flicker and over time turned into a raging fire. Every time we were intimate, I'd find myself getting more and more frustrated, not just with the act itself, but with Oliver. I'd lie there, pretending to enjoy myself, going through the motions, but inside, I was screaming. I wanted to feel something, anything, that would make all the effort seem worth it, but it never came. And the worst part was that Oliver didn't even seem to notice. He thought everything was fine, that we were fine, and that, in a weird way, made me even more frustrated. I started to resent him for it. It wasn't a sudden shift, but more like a slow buildup of anger that I didn't even realize was happening at first. Little by little, I began to place all the blame on him. I started to think that maybe, if he wasn't so incompetent in the bedroom, I wouldn't be feeling this way. I wouldn't be constantly dissatisfied. I wouldn't be fighting these urges to do the one thing we promised each other I wouldn't do. I told myself that if he were just better at pleasing me, this wouldn't be happening. I convinced myself that he was the reason for my growing frustration, that his shortcomings as a lover were the root cause of all my struggles. It was easier to blame him than to admit that maybe the problem was me, that there was something deeper going on inside of me that I wasn't ready to confront. The resentment seeped into other parts of our relationship too. It wasn't just about sex anymore. I started to get annoyed with him over the smallest things that would have never bothered me before. The way he'd leave his clothes on the floor, the way he'd forget to refill the soap dispenser, the way he'd zone out while watching TV. Every little thing he did started to grate on my nerves, and I found myself snapping at him more often than not. I could see the confusion in his eyes every time I got upset with him, and I knew he didn't understand why I was acting this way. He didn't deserve it, and deep down I knew that. But in the moment, it was easier to lash out than to admit that I was the one with the problem. I started to distance myself from him emotionally, too. The intimacy we used to share, not just physically but emotionally, began to fade. I'd avoid deep conversations with him, pulling away whenever he tried to get close. I stopped cuddling with him before bed, stopped reaching out for his hand when we were walking down the street. It was like a wall had gone up between us, and I wasn't even sure how it had gotten there. But once it was up, I didn't know how to take it down. The more I pulled away, the more Oliver tried to fix things. He started planning more date nights, more weekend getaways, anything he could think of to bring us closer again. And every time he did, I felt a pang of guilt, because I knew he was trying. I knew he loved me and wanted to make things better, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what he did, it wasn't going to be enough. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me and this deep, nagging dissatisfaction that had taken root in our relationship. I didn't want to admit it, but I started to fantasize about masturbating again. The thought of it became like a forbidden fruit, something I knew I shouldn't want, but couldn't stop thinking about. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, if I could give in just once, It would take the edge off, and I'd be able to go back to being the wife Oliver needed me to be. I started rationalizing it in my head. I told myself that it wouldn't hurt anyone, that it was a harmless way to release the tension I'd been feeling for so long. But deep down, I knew it wasn't harmless. I knew that if I gave in, I'd be breaking the one rule we'd set to protect our marriage, the one rule that had helped us rebuild trust after everything we'd been through. Still, the temptation grew stronger and stronger. Every night I'd lie in bed next to Oliver, my mind racing, my body aching with frustration. I'd glance over at him, sound asleep, completely oblivious to the internal battle I was fighting. And with each passing day, my resolve weakened. I started to feel like I was suffocating under the weight of it all, my dissatisfaction, my resentment, my guilt. And no matter how hard I tried to fight it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all his fault. That if he were just a little better in bed, if he could just make me feel the way I needed to feel, none of this would be happening. I continued to let my resentment fester, and honestly, looking back, I can't understand why I didn't just talk to him about it. It seems so simple, doesn't it? A conversation, a chance to explain how I felt, to maybe work through it together like we always had with every other issue. But I didn't. I kept everything bottled up, letting the frustration simmer beneath the surface. It felt easier, in a twisted way, to let it grow and turn into something ugly. Maybe part of me was afraid that if I brought it up, I'd be admitting that there was something seriously wrong with our sex life, and with me. But the truth is, I didn't want to deal with it, so instead I kept pushing it down, kept pretending like everything was fine, while internally I was crumbling under the weight of my dissatisfaction. And as the resentment grew, so did my distance from Oliver. Every little thing he did irritated me, and every time we had sex, it just solidified in my mind that he wasn't enough for me. I couldn't even look at him without feeling that creeping frustration, and I started to blame him for it all. I convinced myself that if he wasn't so inadequate in the bedroom, then maybe I wouldn't be having these issues. Maybe I wouldn't be so tempted to fall back into old habits. Eventually, the temptation became too much. I tried to fight it, I really did. But after months of feeling unsatisfied, I gave in. I went back to masturbating, despite everything we'd been through to move past that. I told myself it was just to relieve the frustration, that it wasn't a big deal, but deep down, I knew better. I knew I was breaking the trust we'd worked so hard to rebuild. But at the time, I didn't care. I justified it by telling myself that Oliver was the reason I was doing it in the first place. If he could satisfy me, I wouldn't be in this position. So I started masturbating again, and I did it in secret. I'd wait until he was at work, or I'd find moments when I was alone at home. At first, it felt like I had found the release I was looking for, a way to take the edge off the tension I had been feeling for so long. It was almost liberating in a way to do it again without the guilt or shame, at least at first. I didn't have to face the awkwardness or disappointment that came with our sexual encounters. I didn't have to pretend anymore, at least not when I was alone. For a while it was fine. Oliver didn't find out, and I convinced myself that it wasn't hurting anyone. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before things caught up with me. And of course they did. One afternoon, when I thought I was safe, Oliver walked in on me. I don't even remember why he came home early that day. Maybe he'd forgotten something at the house. But when he opened the door and saw what I was doing, it was like the ground fell out from under me. His face was a mixture of shock, hurt, and confusion, and I instantly felt like the worst person in the world. There was no hiding it, no talking my way out of it. He had caught me red-handed, and there was nothing I could say to make it right. The look on his face, the hurt in his eyes, it was like I had shattered something between us, something fragile and irreplaceable. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, staring at me like he didn't even know who I was anymore. When he finally spoke up, the first thing he did was remind me that I had promised not to. I had promised. I had promised him that I wouldn't go back to those habits, that I wouldn't let my addiction come between us again, and I had broken that promise. The argument that followed was one of the worst we've ever had. He was upset, understandably so, and I was defensive. I could feel the guilt gnawing away at me, but instead of owning up to it, I let my frustration take over. I tried to explain myself, to tell him how unsatisfied I'd been for so long, but the more I talked, the angrier I got. It wasn't fair that I had to deal with this, that I had to carry this burden of feeling like something was missing in our relationship. I felt like I had been suffering in silence for months, and now it was all spilling out in the worst possible way. And then, in the heat of the moment, I made the worst mistake I've ever made in our marriage. I lashed out. I told him that it was his fault, that he was worthless and useless in the bedroom, that if he wasn't so bad at pleasing me, I wouldn't have to resort to masturbating. The words just slipped out, sharp and cruel, before I even had a chance to stop them. The second the words left my mouth, I wanted to take them back. I saw the way his face crumpled, the way the color drained from his cheeks, and I knew I had crossed a line that I couldn't uncross. He didn't say anything after that. He just went quiet, his expression blank, and he gave me the cold shoulder for the rest of the day. No matter how much I tried to apologize, he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't even look at me. It was like I had become invisible to him. Later that evening, he packed a bag and left. He didn't say where he was going, and I didn't ask. I tried to stop him, tried to explain how sorry I was, but he wouldn't hear any of it. He just walked out the door without a word. And I've been sitting here ever since, wondering how I managed to destroy everything we built together in just a few moments of anger and frustration. And I've been calling him, texting him, doing everything I can think of to reach out, but he won't respond. He hasn't picked up a single call, hasn't replied to any of my messages. I don't even know where he is. It feels like he's completely cut me off, and I'm terrified that I've pushed him too far this time. I'm scared that this is it, that this is the thing that's going to destroy our marriage. I don't know what to do. I'm so sorry for what I said, for what I've done. I never meant to hurt him like this, and now I'm afraid I've hurt him beyond repair. I just want to fix things. I just want my husband back. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been a while since I last updated, and I apologize for going silent. I've been going through a lot, as you can imagine, but I want to take a moment to thank everyone who reached out, whether you sent kind words or harsh truths. Every single comment, piece of advice, and bit of feedback really meant a lot to me. Many of you offered insight that I hadn't considered before, and even though some comments were hard to read, they opened my eyes to just how deep this issue went. I also received a lot of advice about curbing the addiction, and I'm taking those to heart as I try to move forward. But here's the thing. I'm not even sure I'll get the chance to put that advice into practice because, well, Oliver wants a divorce. It's hard to even write those words down. I can't believe we've come to this point, and to be honest, I didn't fully see it coming. Or maybe deep down, I did. Maybe there were signs that this was where we were headed, but I was too wrapped up in my own issues to really notice. But even knowing that doesn't make it any easier to accept. It doesn't make the guilt any lighter, or the shame any less suffocating. I feel so incredibly guilty. I know I'm rambling a bit, trying to avoid the heart of the matter, but I need to just rip the Band-Aid off and get to the point. Oliver is done with me. After he left the house that night, he refused to speak to me for days. I tried reaching out to him, but he wouldn't respond. I felt like I was screaming into a void, like I didn't exist anymore in his world. It wasn't until a few of our mutual friends stepped in and encouraged him to talk to me that we finally had a conversation. I had hoped with everything in me that once we talked, we could find some way to work things out. I thought maybe if I apologized enough, begged enough, cried enough, he'd see how sorry I was and be willing to at least consider couples counseling again. I wanted him to understand that I knew I had messed up, but that I was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. But when we finally sat down to talk, he told me straight up that he was done. It was the kind of conversation that makes your stomach drop and your heart race because you realize just how serious everything has become. He told me that he didn't see a path forward for us. He said that he couldn't forgive what I had done, not just the act itself, but the hurtful things I said to him in the heat of the moment. He reminded me of how hard he had worked to support me through my addiction, how patient he had been, and how many chances he had given me before. But this time, he said, there was no going back. He was exhausted, he was hurt, and he was done. I cried, I begged, I asked him to reconsider, to try therapy again, to give us one more chance, but his mind was made up. He said we'd been through therapy before, and if it didn't work then, he didn't see how it would work now. I kept pressing, trying to get him to see that this time could be different, that I could change, that we could fix this if we both worked hard enough, but he wasn't having any of it. He told me, in no uncertain terms, that he was ready to move on with his life without me in it. That conversation was the beginning of the end, and I felt like I was falling apart at the seams. A couple of days later, he came over with some friends to pack up his things. Watching him take his belongings out of the house we built together was one of the most painful experiences of my life. It was so final, so real, and no amount of crying or begging could stop him. He wouldn't even look at me. The person who had once been my rock, my biggest supporter, now seemed like a stranger. At some point, after I tried reaching out to him yet again, he blocked me. He said that any communication from here on out should be done through his lawyer. That was the moment it truly hit me. He's really serious about this. He's really leaving me. And now, I don't know what to do with myself. I've been crying nonstop, and I can't seem to pull myself together. My mom has been here with me, trying to comfort me, but it's hard to accept comfort when the source of the pain feels so much bigger than anything anyone can fix. I feel like I threw everything away. All the trust that we had worked so hard to rebuild, all the love and support he gave me through my addiction, it's all gone because of my actions. And what kills me the most is that I said those horrible, hurtful things to him. I can't believe I let those words come out of my mouth, that I allowed my frustration to turn into cruelty. How could I call him worthless when he had been anything but that? He had been my biggest supporter, my partner, and I betrayed him in the worst possible way. I keep replaying that moment over and over in my head, wishing I could take it back, wishing I could unsay those words and undo the damage I caused, but I can't. I'm stuck with the consequences of my actions, and it's tearing me apart. I know I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I want it so badly. I want to fix things, to somehow make it all right again. But how do you fix something that's so broken? How do you come back from something like this? I don't want a divorce. I can't even wrap my head around the idea of it. It feels like everything is happening so fast, like I'm caught in a whirlwind, and I can't catch my breath. I don't want to lose him, not like this. But I'm starting to realize that maybe it's too late. Maybe I've already lost him. I don't know what to do. I just want to turn back time and undo everything, but that's not how life works, is it? I don't want a divorce. I just want my husband back. Update. Hey Reddit. It's been a while since I last updated, and I apologize for the radio silence. To be honest, I've been trying to avoid thinking too much about everything because, in a strange way, putting my thoughts into words makes it all feel more real. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. This whole situation has been so overwhelming that I've been grasping at anything that might help me cope. It's been hard to find the courage to even type this out, but here I am, trying to update you all on what's been happening. A few days ago, I got served with divorce papers, and let me tell you, the moment I saw those papers in my hands, it was like the world stopped spinning for a second. I always knew this was a possibility, but holding those papers, that made it real in a way I hadn't fully grasped before. I guess part of me had still been hoping deep down that maybe things would somehow work out, that maybe Oliver would come back, and we'd talk things through, and we could find a way to rebuild. But getting served made me realize that this isn't just a rough patch. This is real, and it's happening. I'm getting divorced. It's such a strange feeling, this mix of disbelief and fear. There's no more pretending that this is some bad dream that I'll wake up from, or a movie where the ending turns out okay in the last 5 minutes. This is my life now, and it's falling apart in ways I never expected. I feel like I'm stuck in this surreal nightmare, where I'm watching everything I worked so hard for come crashing down around me, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Since I got those papers, I've been burying myself in work. It's not healthy, I know, but it's the only way I know how to keep myself from spiraling even more. Work has become my escape, something I can control, something that doesn't make me feel like a failure. It helps me shut out the endless cycle of thoughts that keep running through my head about how I messed everything up. It's not like I can undo the damage, so all I can do is focus on something else and try to keep myself together. But even work can't fill the emptiness I feel. No matter how much I try to distract myself, there's always this sinking feeling in my chest that I can't get rid of. My mom has been staying with me at the house, and I know she's just trying to help, but it's hard to let anyone in when I feel like I've failed so completely. I think she's worried that I might do something stupid. She keeps reminding me that life goes on, that I'll get through this, but it's hard to believe her right now. Everything feels so final, like I'm staring at the ruins of my marriage, and there's no way to rebuild from here. The guilt, the regret, it's all consuming. I've spent so much time beating myself up over everything that happened, how I let my addiction take control again, how I lashed out at Oliver in the worst possible way, how I destroyed the trust we had built. And now he's moving on, and I'm left here, picking up the pieces of what's left of my life. I feel horrible all around. I feel horrible about how things ended with Oliver. I feel horrible about the things I said, the pain I caused him. And I feel horrible for myself because this isn't how I pictured my life turning out. I thought we'd be the kind of couple that could weather anything, that no matter how tough things got, we'd find our way back to each other. But that's not how it's playing out, and I don't know how to make peace with that. Part of me still wants to believe there's a way to fix this, that maybe something will change. But I also know that holding on to that hope might just make things worse. I have to face the reality of the situation. I'm getting divorced, and it scares the hell out of me. I keep asking myself how I ended up here, but the answer is always the same. It's because of me, my actions, my choices. I'm not trying to throw a pity party or make excuses, but the weight of that truth is crushing. I hurt someone who loved me, who stood by me when I was at my lowest, and I can't blame him for walking away. I just wish it didn't have to be like this. Anyway, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. I feel like I'm in limbo, just waiting for the next shoe to drop, waiting for my life to fully unravel. I don't know what the future looks like without Oliver in it, and that terrifies me. But I also know that I can't keep living in denial. I can't keep pretending that things will magically go back to how they were. I need to figure out how to move forward, even if that feels impossible right now. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I'm sorry this update is such a downer, but I needed to get it off my chest. Update. Hello, Reddit. I apologize that it's been a while since I last updated. Life has been chaotic, and I've been dealing with more than I ever thought I'd have to, but I'm back now. I logged into my account and saw a bunch of requests for an update, and I appreciate that you've been following along with my situation. So here's what's been happening. First of all, I've moved back in with my parents. Honestly, I just couldn't take it anymore. The more I stayed at the house, the more I felt like I was suffocating. I hated myself for what had happened. Every day, being surrounded by memories of what we had, by all the little reminders of the life Oliver and I built together, it felt like torture. So after the divorce was finalized, I suggested that Oliver buy me out of the house. Surprisingly, he agreed. We didn't argue about it, he just went ahead and did it. Now the house is his. I'm out of there, and honestly, it's probably for the best. At least I won't have a constant daily reminder of him everywhere I look. The divorce was finalized quicker than I expected. I think that's partly because, in the end, there wasn't much to untangle between us. We didn't have kids, no joint debts, nothing that really tied us together except for the house. And, like I just mentioned, he ended up buying me out of it, so that was settled without much drama. It feels so strange to say it, but yeah, it's done. We're done. I always thought that Oliver was the person I'd spend the rest of my life with. I used to picture us growing old together, thinking we'd figure out how to get through the hard times like we always did. And now we're just over. I can't really wrap my head around it. It feels so surreal, like I'm trapped in a bad dream I can't wake up from. I never expected my life to turn out like this, not in a million years. I thought I'd have more time to fix things, to make things right. But now it's like there's this huge empty space where my future used to be, and I have no idea what to do with it. I won't lie, it's been hard. Every day I have to wake up, get dressed, and show up to work, putting on a bright fake smile like my entire world hasn't crumbled around me. My coworkers don't know what's going on, and I'm not about to unload my problems on them, so I have to pretend like I'm okay. Like I'm not dying a little more inside every day. It's exhausting. I'm so tired of pretending that I'm fine when I'm not. I'm tired of acting like everything's normal when nothing about this feels normal at all. It's like I'm on autopilot, just trying to get through each day, and it's honestly draining me in every possible way. And you know what? I think what's hardest for me to accept is that I did this to myself. I made the choices that led to this point. I hurt Oliver in ways that I can't even fully comprehend, and now I have to live with the consequences of that. I lost the person I thought I'd grow old with, and it's all because of the choices I made. I know it's not healthy to keep beating myself up over it, but it's impossible not to. The guilt is suffocating. Every time I close my eyes, I replay everything that went wrong, and it just eats away at me. Some days I don't even know how to get through the next hour, let alone the next week. I feel like I'm just trying to exist, to get through each day without breaking down. I've cried so much these past few weeks that I feel like there's nothing left in me anymore. But still, I keep showing up, keep going through the motions, because what else can I do? I have to keep going, even if I don't know how. My mom has been amazing through all of this. She's been spending every moment with me, trying to make sure I don't fall into a deeper hole than I already have. She's always there, making sure I eat, making sure I don't do anything too self-destructive. I appreciate her, I really do, but it's hard to let anyone in when I feel like such a failure. I know she's just trying to help, but I don't think anyone can really understand what I'm going through unless they've been through it themselves. So, that's where I'm at, Reddit. This is the F*** King update. I'm just trying to exist, trying to figure out how to move forward when it feels like everything I thought my life was going to be has been ripped away from me. I don't know what the future holds anymore.